right, everybody, looks like the time is now 7 p.m. Everybody please rise and take the pledge of I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alderman Kelly. Alderman Simmons.
Present.
Alderman Hendrickson.
Present.
Alderman Whitman.
Present.
Alderman Baird. Alderman Hall.
Present.
And Mayor Schneider.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Administrator, we have the agenda amendments to be made.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The agenda stands as is.
If I might, I know we've got a new application for the tree board. One of our members is not doing well and probably will not be returning to the tree board. So could we add that to the
Are we?
agenda?
I'm sorry, we prepared for that. Are you?
I have it continued.
You have it? Okay. Sure. Comfortable with that. I know I've been out of the office today. I managed a couple things and I know sent me an email. I wasn't able to quite catch up with it. So we're, as long as we're ready for it, see your can't have it.
Pop that into item 13 maybe?
Sir.
Thank you.
Any other agenda amendments that need to be made? Someone like to approve the agenda? Make a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the amended agenda. Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Alderman Hendrickson.
Yes.
Alderman Whitman.
Yes.
Alderman Baird.
Yes.
Alderman Hall.
Yes.
And Alderman Simmons.
Aye.
Thank you.
Item number 3 is the consent agenda. The board can please review those items and approve them later.
Brad, I did have a question you may or may not be able to answer. This is related to the outstanding invoices. This is page 3 of 6 in that section. $587 for Freedom Fest newspaper ads. Do you know what the ads, what we were advertising in the paper?
Let our parks director respond to that.
Oh, sorry, Jason, I didn't realize you were back there.
Yeah, back here in the back. Everybody else got there before I did. That was an ad in the Commonwealth, just inviting the public to the event. So it was in the Commonwealth.
Gotcha. It just seems like a lot for paper that didn't get read a lot. So just curious.
For Veterans Day last year, we did about approximate investment on social media, Facebook ad, try and target. And I don't know, we have metrics to compare A to B, but that's about probably the going rate to try to advertise or something. So, Jason, is that what we spent on Facebook targeting last year for Veterans Day, if you recall?
I think it was pretty close to that for the Veterans Day Facebook posts, yeah.
So I think we had the Commonwealth advertising, I think we had radio spots. Jason, just unpack it a bit for context and everybody's aware.
Sure.
Jason, what have we spent on radio and other advertising?
So altogether this year on Freedom Fest, we spent about $2,100 on advertising. That was media advertising through Zimmer Communications, not sponsored by Eagle Outdoors. And then the $587 at the Greene County Commonwealth. So our advertising sponsor was Eagle Outdoors.
Gotcha. For all of it?
For all of it.
Okay, that's it. All right. If there are other questions, I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Alderman Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Hendrickson.
Yes.
Alderman Whitman.
Aye.
Alderman Baird.
Aye.
And Alderman Hall. Thank you.
All right, item number 4 is the discussion and vote on the current outstanding invoices. Board, please review that and get ready.
approve the outstanding invoices.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Alderman Baird?
Aye.
Alderman Hall? Alderman Simmons?
Aye.
Alderman Hendrickson?
Yes.
And Alderman Whitman?
Aye.
Thank you.
Item number 5 is citizen input. We've had, this is one of the larger crowds we've had, so if anyone wishes to speak, they can. If have something to administer.
Sure, just to help provide some clarity on citizen input, we do have 2 items tonight for folks to speak. Citizen input, and also the public hearing for rezoning request for Danco Investments. Mr. Reynolds, I believe there's several folks here that are wishing to speak on the public hearing. I think those wishing to speak for Danco, speak on that agenda item. If you'll wait until item number 6 for the public hearing, that would probably be the best place for that. And if you have anything else for citizen input, maybe we do that now.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else to discuss under citizen input? You do? Yeah.
I was just wondering, is the
Mayor, you need to come up here, state your name.
Hi, I'm Mary Barwick. I live in Fox Creek subdivision. Been before talked about the light. I didn't know if that's on the agenda for tonight or not.
It is later on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Come on up.
Yes, my name is Kevin Conn. I live outside of Willard, Nashville, but we shop and I work in Willard. We have a short-term rental, and so we were having so much enjoyment and success that we were looking into some property maybe in the Willard area, but when I went into the building, there didn't seem to be a real clear definition of business license, zoning, all those different things that go into short-term rentals. And so I was just asking for some clarification and just let me know if something is decided. I mean, the platform that we use is Airbnb. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Airbnb. It's stated in Airbnb that the world of short-term rentals has changed dramatically from, the frat houses and beach rentals and wild parties. It's a lot of watch and feedback, and people stay at our place and judge us, and we judge them, and based on those ratings. But again, it's been a successful experience, and we just kind of looked at a property, and then I thought, well, those are the kind of things you need to line up before you take these any further. I mean, I did it real quick on that platform. I know there's lots of different ones, but Ozark had 12, Republic 5, Nixa 10, and I did contact some of those cities and didn't get responses from them, so I'm not sure exactly. The only one was Nixa, where I was online able to pull up the ordinance that they've adopted. And so, again, I would just encourage you that it's at least in my experience, it's a positive one. And if you decide to open your doors to that, I'd like to possibly invest it. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Administrator,
Yes, sir.
never mind. It's like, since you already left, so, okay.
Well, yeah, so typically we don't, certainly board discretion on what we discuss here at Citizen, but I think for this item, it might be best to revisit it during unfinished business or old business or at another meeting. Certainly it's something that's been on our radar. Certainly we're something smaller than Republic, Ozark, Nixon Republic, so it stands to reason they're a little further ahead than we are. Seeing the whole thing, kind of unfold with short-term rentals as well as the good and the bad. We certainly welcome anything that would bring more people to Willard for economic development, but putting the parameters around in place that's consistent with board appetite hasn't been a bridge we crossed yet. So it's on our radar. It's not at the top of the list right now. So happy to discuss that later.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to bring up under citizen input? Now we'll oh, yes, sir.
My name is Steve Cobb. There appears to be some additional construction going on between AB and Miller Road there on 160. My question is, does the city have a master plan for water runoff?
construction are you talking about?
Well, you know, the road there where it goes by the vet, they're cutting that through. And I understand there's to be some more commercial business going on, is that accurate?
Not totally sure.
This is what I've been told. But I do, that aside, is there a master plan for water runoff dealing with it in the future?
So I don't know the property in question, I'm trying to kind of gather that in my mind. Regardless, what I hear you asking about is there a stormwater master plan? There's no stormwater master plan applied to the city, it's not. Typically, I don't think we have to have that until we're a 10,000 person community, but we're certainly happy to hear your concerns.
Well,
Unless there's an older version that I'm not aware of.
There was a Southview drainage basin study, Brad, that's on file, many years old. But we refer to Greene County stormwater management regulations and the FEMA floodplain regulations that come into play depending on the area and location.
Is that the question you're asking about South?
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
we're
right.
talking about Proctor Road, am I right?
Yeah, that's,
Okay.
that, you know, everything's in your middle school comes right down through what I call Willard Hills.
Yeah.
Which is where I live.
Southview, yeah, that's
And there was a widening project on that drainage ditches, and I was told that it was even marked off. They were gonna come up on that ditch that runs parallel to Southview and South Main, but that never did happen.
We cleaned out the ditch, not necessarily widened it. I mean, it was cleaned out to what it originally was.
Okay.
You know, I've heard the sediment
Yeah.
crap up from
But was it, I know they located it coming east from down there to the south of Southview, that they were gonna clean that up. Was that in the plan, or it didn't happen, or is it still on the works?
that, I'll have to refer to.
Yeah, I can tell you what we know is the work is in progress, right? If you were in that area, you would have seen the backhoes and track hoes and stuff in there, and that stuff. Melville and Southview, Haase, there is no, I don't know what you call a plan, right? But there's no engineered architectural FEMA-based plan that, you know, if that's what you're referring to, there's work plans and there's work planning to keep that cleaned out and keep it to its original size and scope.
I told some city employees they were gonna come out and clean that ditch up along there and stop that as my property, and I invited them to just keep on coming and get mine too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of brush that's grown up in that, and this spring, with all the leaves from last fall, created quite a little dam and stuff, so.
Now, I believe that when we first discussed that, we discussed it would have to take place over several years, you know, getting the work done in the dry periods of time, when other work wasn't going on with city staff.
Well, I've got some concerns that some people's gonna be flooded down there someplace. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to bring up under citizen input? Come on up, sir.
My name's Richard Boatwright. I'd like to know what's going on at 60 Barwick Place, why we ain't getting it cleaned up. That place is trashed, and all I hear, we kicked it down the road again. We can't go in and clean it up. Why? I mean, that lady's let dogs live in that house while she lives in another in Springfield, and dogs never go outside. And that house is filth. And it's been going on for 3 years. I live next door to it. I have to smell that place. It's horrible. And she was there last Thursday night. Spent the night in the car. She come out Friday morning. Seen me, she come up to me and asked for water. I gave her some water. And I said, why don't you spend some time in that house? She said, I'm scared to get in that house because there's animals living in that house. Squirrels. And I seen something coming out the garage door window the other night. So, and she's a hoarder, and she piled things in the backyard, front yard, and what have you, and it's been over a 3-year period. She's been in the court system. paying their fines, and this, that, and the other. And they said they were gonna come in Friday and clean it up, and somebody kicked it down the road again. Why ain't we getting it cleaned up? What's going on? Anybody got any answers?
I don't know if this is something to discuss.
Yeah, I can give a brief discussion. We can finish up unfinished business or discuss more with the board at a later time. I understand Mr. Boatwright's concern and probably his frustration. I certainly empathetic to that. To more accurately describe my viewpoint is, there's nothing being ignored. We brought out our files. It would be very, very thick based on how we're following up on all nuisances and specifically this nuisance. To the extent that I can discuss an individual person or constituent, I'm probably going to be, not going to discuss someone's, details with the city or where they stand legally. I'm happy to discuss what's on matter of public record. There was a hearing last Thursday, and the person was issued multiple tickets. I'm not sure what the extent is on how many tickets we're at now, but and the city is in a position where we take the next legal steps. We had planned on doing that, taking action on Friday. There were some other city priorities that have taken quite honestly priority over that. And so when we have the opportunity, we'll take the next legal steps to mitigate that nuisance in particular.
How long down the road is that gonna be? This has been going on 3 years now,
I can't commit to a definite date or time. I understand your frustration, but there's a process we have to go through. My goal would have been to do it last Friday. My goal would be to do it the next 30 days.
Poor answer. Just, 3 years, gosh.
All right. Does anybody else have anything to bring up under citizen input? Okay. I'm going to move to item number 6, which is the public hearing on the rezoning request for Danco Investments. From you, Ken.
Thank you, Mayor. There will be a public hearing on rezoning request for Danco Investments. The Board of Aldermen will now take any comments regarding this issue. Anyone wanting to speak to the board, please come front here, give your name, and there's a limit of 5 minutes. That's all I already know.
It's 10. I thought it was 10.
Sometimes it's 3. It all depends how bad it is.
Okay. My name is Kim Hayes. We brought this up again to P&Z and they approved it last month. This was a tract that I originally planned on developing, and there was going to be about 22 lots in there. But with the skyrocketing cost of development, plus we hit quite a bit of rock on phase 2 and 3 that we are currently on, and then we had a question about, Randy brought up about the overfly zone of the airport, which would kill it from ever being developed. So Stephanie Bradshaw lives next door, and she's been telling me for a couple of years about buying it to include it in her operation. And we finally come up with an agreement. I'll let her explain later on what her operation is. But we have a lot of support in the neighborhood. I mean, this fits because everything around it to the south and to the west is acreage. People's got horses, people's got cattle. And I think what Stephanie does is an exceptional thing for the community that's really needed. So I'm going to let, and one other thing, I think just everybody that lives around it is in total agreement with this, which is kind of unusual. Usually on a developer, everybody's against them, but I think we're all on the same book and page on this. Is everybody for it?
Yes, yeah.
Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Steph Bradshaw. I live at 465 East Four Horse Lane, right next door to the property in question. I run an equine rehab and rescue program. I rehab a select number of horses. I try to help as many as I can, and there are lots and lots in need, but I also really care about the environment and the land, and so I don't want to overwhelm the land by putting too many horses on one property. So I've been looking into expanding to the property next door. It would be a lovely addition to my facility. It would allow me the ability to help more horses, as well as bring in more accessibility to the community. I have several youth outreach programs that allow kids with a variety of histories, whether, there are lots of just general kids, but also kids with special needs, maybe kids that are in the foster care system or have some behavioral issues. They get to come out to the farm and learn some better ways to spend their time than what they're up to before that. And the main thing that we need to get done so we can get this property is we need to ensure that if we get this property, we can use it for the intended purpose, which would be to expand our equine rescue program and use it to house rescue horses. And like Kim said, the whole neighborhood is here in support because it's what they want to see happen with the property too, which I think is pretty great. I think it'd be a great addition to the community and a great addition to the neighborhood and a perfect use for the land.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this issue? And if it's just redundancy, I think we all know that you're all for it. But is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue to add something different? Hearing nothing else, Mayor, I'd ask that public hearing be closed and turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Next slide. Item number 7 is an ordinance accepting the rezoning request for Danco Investments. Turn it over to the board for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just while the board's forming their thoughts, I'll give a little bit of background on the city's view on this, and I'll just hit the high points, and I'd ask Randy to go in depth after maybe hearing a few of my opening remarks. I asked Randy to present the city's view on this, which would be to not accept the rezoning request, and that's not out of obstinance for those in the neighborhood or those looking for this, but it's an acknowledgement of what is in our comprehensive plan, which the board had in the past adopted by resolution. Several of you were on the board when we adopted the comprehensive plan, and that comprehensive plan calls for that to be developed in residential development. And so, I think what the board needs to weigh is how we apply the comprehensive plan, and do we want to set precedents for properties down zoning in certain areas. And so with that, Mr. Hayes is correct. There is a very small portion of the property that is in the airport overlay. However, the statute, the ordinances that apply to that do say that you cannot develop on that in less than 10 acres. So that's actually correct. It would be speculation, but reasonable to believe that the airport in the city of Springfield would allow a variance to that, but it is not known for a fact at this time. The farm in question does have several nice facilities, and I'm not sure if there's a nonprofit involved with that. I think there may be, and so understand that they may want to turn that into agriculture-based area, and that would be a board decision for zoning. The staff is taking the position that it's not consistent with our comprehensive plan, and it's not consistent with how you view development. But with that, Randy, is there a few highlights you'd like to point out?
I think the main point I'd like to bring up that was discussed at the planning and zoning meeting, when you have residential properties, and again, it's nothing against the owner or the proposed owner. I think it's a great idea and a great concept and a great use, and I think that use will work in R1 zoning. But from staff's position, when we have R1 zone properties all the way around and we drop a lower zone property, in the planning world, that's considered spot zoning. And we just really as staff can't support that because typically you would have more of a step zoning. So, you know, I really don't have much more to add. I think the property can be served either with either zoning. Utilities are not there. You know, it could support one house either in ag or R1 zoning, either one. But again, anything more than that, and it would take an appeal to the airport to have a variance.
Let's back up for just a minute. So this is 10 acres, is that right?
It's 11.3.
11.3, okay. So under R1 zoning presently, over 5 acres, 1 animal per 3 acres. Is that, am I right? Two animals per 3 acres?
Or 1 animal per 2 acres.
1 animal, 2 acres, okay. It's been a little while since I read it, so I've been trying to go back on this. Under an ag, there's not necessarily a limit.
It's not really a limit.
The Greene County regulations, which have regulations in place to protect from overstocking.
Okay.
So how many can you have on 11 acres on A1?
So on A1, it would be subject to Greene County regulations, which would give us up to 20 animals. So for every goat, chicken, anything like that counts towards that number versus the 5 to 6 horses for the same size land with R1. Which again, that's any animal. So if we have 3 chickens, then only 2 horses can be on that 11 acres, right? If we have 2 goats, then only 3 horses. Because the regulations for Willard just state animals, they don't specify for the type of animal.
Your intended use on this. You know, I've been out prior to you owning the facility and had done some work with the previous owners and have looked at the property. So this new piece of property, are you intending that to be, what are you intending to improve on it as is?
Yeah, so as is right now, the new property that's the one in question will be primarily just pasture. The only buildings that might be put up would be shelters unless we just adjoin the pasture to existing ones on my property so that the animals have access to proper shelter. But
Shelter, you're talking just a standard loafing shed?
yeah, like a loafing shed, yeah, like what we already have out there in the lake. If that makes sense.
Anybody else have any questions?
So I sat in on the planning and zoning meeting regarding this issue. And as I recall, the land in question is wooded, correct?
Yes, yeah.
So really it has no grazing ability currently. You would have to do a lot of clearing to make that happen.
Yeah, it depends on the animal you put on it, because goats would make fine grazing out of that. And luckily, goats also work hand in hand with horses really well.
But you're doing horse rescue. That's
Yes, we do
the
equine rescue,
aspect.
and we also have, so we do complementary grazing practices. Instead of damaging the land by using bulldozing or mowing or other like toxic chemicals or something like that, we do more traditional farming methods that allow us to use a small herd of goats to help clear the space so that the horses have room to graze, if that makes sense. And that way we don't have to take out any of the large trees, we don't do any damage to the natural water flow, there's no noise disturbance or anything like that. Does that sort of make sense?
Do you have plans what plans, if any, do you have for actual clearing?
For clearing,
Mechanical
so
clearing?
mechanical clearing, none. There's a possibility, so where the fence goes up, we would, around the perimeter, if there's anything in the way. From what I've seen of the property, it seems like there are some small trees along the edge that could be easily cleared with like a skid steer as the fence goes up, so there's no extra disturbance past the fence building itself. But other than that, there are several locations that a shelter could go up without mechanical clearing. And several of the places on my property that are adjoining that property as well as other places on my property, we've used the goats to clear as well with a lot of success and allowed us to provide more pasture space and more grazing space for our horses. And we do provide hay, by the way, so it's not 100% determined by the number of like the amount of grass available to them.
If this were to go through, and I know I'm kind of asking for your opinion here and this subject, but what do you see as the number of animals, the number of horses that you expect to, in the next 2 years, have on this property?
So the goal is to have 15 horses in the program total between the two properties. But in 2 years, maybe keeping that closer to like 10 or less, because there is going to be some clearing process, rotational grazing, putting fence up, all of that. So we'll want to be sure it's good for the land. So whatever we have to do in that respect.
How many do you presently have?
Presently have in the program, we're approaching 10 at this point. Yeah.
Just from what I've seen, like I helped transport some horses out to Whiskey Ridge. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yes, yeah. They help pull from the local auction.
A year ago, and this is sure a lot less number wise than what they're running, what they're servicing.
Yeah.
That's running would be the right word there. Doesn't scare me.
So, again, for clarification, because I was at that prior meeting, I think we have something really nice in place to deal with this. It's called a conditional use permit, which only the owner of the property can apply for, and it goes away should the owner sell the property. So, in this instance, the owner of the property, Mr. Hayes, he can apply for a conditional use permit, but it doesn't do any good because when he sells the property and it goes away. Our buyer here wants to do this. She could apply for a conditional use permit and get this done. And I think that's a really good way to take this, but you had an objection to that, and I would like you to voice that.
So the main problem that we have with the conditional use permit is that there's a lot of uncertainty. We can't actually know that until we purchase the property. And so we run the risk of an equine rescue, which we've been blessed with the funds to do what we're doing now. And we've been blessed with the funds to potentially expand the program. But it's a lot of money. Real estate is not cheap right now, as you probably know. And so to spend all that money and potentially end up with a property that doesn't really allow us to do much more good, it's a big risk. And to be blunt about it, the donors that are putting money down to make this sale happen aren't willing to do that on the hope that we get a conditional use permit once the money's changed hands.
Randy, can have either of you just give a guess, what percentage of the property is in the airport zone? Just a wild guess, is it 25%?
Not even, like maybe 1%.
I would say not more than an acre.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you know the property better, Ken, so it's a map somewhere.
There's some maps floating around up there.
However, though, that restricts the entire.
It does, by ordinance.
It might as well be 100%.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, with Stephanie, you know, she's relying on this to be an A1 to obtain finance. And I know it's spot zoning, but it's also in an area where there's a lot of agricultural around it. And eventually, if you sell it in 10 years, it's probably going to be rezoned to R1, because you've got 20 acres, so this would make 31 acres. So it's not like, I don't think that it's really detriment to the city as far as, and I understand the deal on spot zoning, but I thought spot zoning in the comprehensive plan was more to the commercial aspect than on a residential tract that's where it's at.
Corey, the clerk has a copy of the, I want to see.
Yeah, I've got it. I just wanted somebody else to put an estimate on how much.
On the spot, we didn't have a chance to discuss it. Are you comfortable discussing spot zoning, the reality of it, and how it applies to residential?
Well, basically, yeah, and it could apply to residential as well as commercial, but basically spot zoning is you're adjusting your zoning rules, regulations to satisfy one person's need based on, and usually that needs based on income. That's what spot zoning is. You're preferring one over the general zoning plan.
So I thought Mr. Hayes brought up a point that is one of my concerns, and that is if in 10 years she sells it, it's still zoned A1 if we rezone it. And it stays that way until it gets rezoned. And no matter what the neighbors around at the time want, it can be run as an agricultural property. And with no current limitations from the city on zoning, only from the county. And that really is my concern, and that's why I like the conditional use. It runs with the current owner. And I understand the objection to that because we can't sit here and guarantee that we'll do it, even if we all say we will. There's no guarantee until it's done. But it is that, you rezone this, we rezone it. Rezone it.
The conditional use.
No matter who owns it.
That would go through the Board of Adjustment?
No.
No?
No. Or, well, we go to planning zoning first, and then board of
I don't know that I'm allowed, in my opinion. So just in terms of the agriculture restrictions and everything, there's still a restriction on like feedlots and that sort of thing. So there's still no way that somebody could come in and essentially pack an unreasonable number of animals on there. And even if you're agriculture, you still can't have like nuisance smells, nuisance, anything like that. So if somebody were to come on that property, regardless of how it's zoned, they can't make a huge nuisance or it would be a problem regardless. And then regarding the spot zoning, my understanding is when the city of Willard brought in zoning and translated that from Greene County, they didn't carry over any of the agricultural zones, so everything was just sort of gathered in as R1, regardless of the property and its ideal use and in the location. And the idea of the spot zoning and putting the one needs above everybody else, well, I think everybody else is in agreement that this is not for one person's need, but for everybody. And also to say that this particular spot isn't a spot of agriculture surrounded by subdivisions. This is a spot of agriculture next to a 20-acre equine facility, next to a 10-acre hobby farm, next to another 5-acre hobby farm bordering another 10-acre hobby farm. So even though those are technically zoned R1, my understanding is that's more because of a blanket zoning change and a blanket assignment of R1 zoning, not necessarily the actual purpose and use of the land in the area. That sort of makes sense.
So, forgive me, it's Mr. Hayes, correct?
Yes.
All right. What was your plan previous? And I know you probably mentioned it, but I was looking through notes and trying to wrap my brain around everything. What were you going to put on originally before the cost and everything went up?
I think we had 23 residential lots.
Okay, so more residential.
Yes.
Okay.
And with excessive cost and there's an excessive amount of rock up there that's going to be hard to put utilities into it. And so it just doesn't make sense to develop.
How long have you owned the property?
I think I bought it in 04.
Okay.
Now, I can't speak on the exact, the A1 did transfer over when we took in some county zoning, but I know for a fact that when things transferred over, we ran into issues. How many of you remember Lester Street? A lot of those houses on commercial couldn't be resold. We ran into that just a couple of years ago. It could stand to reason that the same thing happened. I'm not saying it did, I don't know. But in my mind, I can wrap my head around that.
I guess when that would have come in from Greene County would have been decades ago.
I didn't go back in the records to check to see when the property was annexed, but.
Well, when we were talking about those Lester Streets, we were talking in the 70s then.
And that's my understanding. From the PNC meeting, I think that's what was brought up.
And it was stand to reason all that came at the same time, as far as the zoning transfers.
So there probably would be, anything that here, based on the conversation, probably would see the comprehensive plans that we've gone through that would have said that the intent is R1.
Correct.
Say that again, I didn't.
Well, like, since I understand the argument that it was brought in from Greene County, and I'll say decades ago, I don't have an exact date, but if it was decades ago, we've gone at least through a comprehensive plan, which would have said the intent is for R1, and that is consistent with the properties adjacent to this property. I understand the hobby farm nature and that, and I think those properties are really value adding within our city limits, so not taking anything away from that. R1 or hobby farms that have a lot of value to our community. I'm just trying to lay some context again, against the comments and statements. I think you don't know if Springfield's going to allow variance. If you assume that they're not, then you're paying one residential home being there versus if you go with agriculture.
Which there could still be a residential home with agriculture given the size of the property.
Yeah, absolutely, that's correct. It's really just a matter of who's taking the risk, right? Is the city taking the risk or are the investors taking the risk? And that's what's got to be laid out in front of the board tonight. To me, that's why I think the conditional use permit, I understand that that's sort of split in the maybe. The city provides a conditional use permit, and that could be used to secure financing. And so perhaps a resolution to support a conditional use permit might give some assurance, but those are all things that could be discussed and unpacked. I don't think Mr. Hayes is going to change his mind in the immediate future, so I don't think there's I don't know what the rush is or if there's a rush. Undermine, I don't know their nonprofits or their boards, I don't know their bylaws or how anything else works, so don't mean to speak to that, but I think most of the discussion has surfaced, and so that's where we're at. But I don't know if I was at planning zoning meetings, so I don't know. I understand all the conversation, so happy to keep discussing.
So forgive me, I don't know if I can do this. The group basically right in this section, you guys are all neighbors, is that what I saw? I saw a bunch of head nodding.
Yeah.
I was trying to wrap my brain around
Yeah,
it.
these are all my neighbors.
So obviously you see some positive in what she does. Would you guys mind sharing like your insight?
Well, I guess we both versus houses.
Versus the house.
You're talking residential, you're talking 23 houses in there, which Mr. Hayes was trying to put in there. I don't particularly appreciate it. I bought that land for a reason.
That's where I stand as well. I own the 10-acre hobby farm right next door on Warhorse, so it would be a huge nuisance to my farm and my land, to have houses there, so.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What if there was only one house there instead of 23? Did everybody stay in one house?
I prefer to see a bunch of horses, and what Stephanie wants to do with it's gonna be to good use, so.
What's the likelihood of someone, I mean, he's done this since '04, I don't know, Mr. Hayes, forgive me, I don't know all what you do. You develop, I'm assuming, correct, homes, and you do commercial as well, or?
Some commercial.
Okay.
I did the McDonald's.
Okay. So, but no one's gonna beat your door down to buy one home to put on that you develop, is that what I'm understanding? Or is that, yeah, is that speaking on the target?
Well, without utilities up there, it just doesn't make sense.
Okay.
And plus, it's heavily wooded, and it'd have to be a lot of clearing, and I don't want to really do that. And Stephanie's got a plan for that. And, you know, it really fits on what her plan is, and it fits the area, it's gonna make the neighbors really happy.
To make a community.
Yeah.
It's a huge cost with serving the property with utilities. The water line stops before it gets up Farm Road, up Hughes Road that far. And so for sewer to go in there has to be a lift station. And then it's gonna have to be pumped over the hill and a gravity line constructed to phase 3 of the Stone Creek, or phase 2 of the Stone Creek subdivisions. With the water line extension and the cost, the way the city's costs are structured for accepting lift stations, you can't just build a lift station, turn it over to the city. There's 10-year maintenance costs and fees that are associated that gets the cost of development if it were to be approved with the fly zone being there. And that was the roadblock that set the tone for that being pulled from the preliminary plat.
So as it sits, just to be clear, you can't put a subdivision in there right now. It's not.
It's not cost feasible.
Well, no, I mean, with the airport zone, you can't do it right now. You would have
Not
to get
without
variance.
contesting that. Not without contesting or appealing that.
So the chance of it getting 23 homes is pretty thin.
Yeah, and we really, I don't know that it's good for the city to consider the developer's cost when it comes to properties, just in the sense of costs go up and down. You know, they can go up, they do often in recessions and other times come down. So, yes, it would be expensive for a developer to develop that piece of property. It would be expensive for a developer to develop any remaining property in Willard, though, just to put it, factually with the way where there's opportunity to develop, it's going to be expensive. So I probably just caution, cost to develop probably is something we have to put an asterisk next to when we discuss it. As far as water, to serve 23 homes, we would need a water extension, but to serve one home, there's water in that area. In fact, are they on city water now? Is the Bradshaw's property?
I'm on the well, my understanding is the property doesn't have great opportunity for well because of the rock.
So like other properties, when that's the case, we typically, at least today, allow a well to be drilled and such things to be put in.
And I think there's enough safeguards if you did happen to zone it day one, where it's not going to be abused as far as, a feedlot or a hog operation or anything like that, because I think there's enough language in the ordinance that you couldn't do that.
I think most of the communities here, because they don't want 23 homes built there, I don't know that if one home was being built there, I don't think the community would be here to speak. That's not consistent with what our experiences in the city. But it is, there are probably farms around it.
That are zoned R1.
That are zoned R1. And, so it's a matter of what this board would like to do in that situation. The appropriate route for most cities is to knock down zoning, not spot zoning, not to conflict with their comprehensive plan, but certainly this is something that's in a gray area, and so they recommendation would be, I'm going to ask staff to not support any downs and not to support any policy that's not consistent with our comprehensive.
Just for clarification, there's nothing in the R1 zoning that prohibits having animals on that property, but it does limit the number.
Severely limits,
That's the primary reason for rezoning to an ag zoning is to increase the number of animals.
What I hear is there's two reasons. One is the limit to the amount of animals, and then the other is the financing for the nonprofit or to the buyer. The buyer wishes that for easy finance.
But if everything was, when they did their zoning plan, if everything was taken in an R1, then why did they even have A1 in the book? And so anybody that wants to go from R1 to A1, so you're automatically R1, then you try to get A1, and then you say it's down zoning. So why do you even have A1 in the zoning regulations?
I wouldn't bring it to the attention that all my cities, and I think Willard is one of them too, that when property comes in, it comes in as ag, not as R1. I think there's an ordinance specifically on that.
I was told everything came in as R1.
Well, it's telling you that
We would have adopted those since we took this over. And if I'm not mistaken, it should come in as it presently is. So we get something that is already in some sort of R1, it will come in R1. If we take in some property north of town that's in an ag zoning, it would stay in ag zoning until we do make a move to rezone it.
It is zoned agriculture by Greene County. So when it was annexed by the county, it was zoned agriculture, but the city of Willard chose to adopt it as R1.
The tax statement still shows it as A1.
So.
I'm just trying, that's what, I had my book here, I can look it up, I draw a faulting, but I'm pretty sure that everything comes in as ag.
So it sounds like there's some back taxes.
No.
After the meeting.
And I think just, it seems like the primary argument against this is down zoning or spot zoning and the comprehensive plan. And in terms of the comprehensive plan and what the intention is for any property with the zoning of R1, the intention is for that to be residential area. And with spot zoning being that you don't want one spot of agriculture surrounded by a bunch of residential area. But the reality is, I don't know if you're going to put the residential area inside the indoor arena or outside the indoor arena, but next door to me, like next door to this property, to the right of it, down below it, up above it, to the left, everywhere, we've got things that seem to fit in line with agriculture zoning more than R1, but have been adopted as R1 due to that Greene County zoning acceptance that happened back in the 70s. And so I don't think zoning this as agriculture is going to have that effect of having subdivisions with a little farm in the middle of it, because there are farms all around it. And I think that the intended use of this property is not going to be residential subdivisions or anything like that due to the airport overlay zone, due to the nature of the property and the cost to the city involved with developing that, and the cost to the developers, and the enormous nuisance that would take place to everybody surrounding the property, if whether it's one home or 23 homes. So the reality is, I see this not as, and the technical terms may see this as down zoning or spot zoning, but this zoning change is going to allow that property to do what it will do best and how it will serve the community and the land best. And it will match everything that's around it, make all of its neighbors happy. And it will fit the description of the property and its intended future better than the current zoning.
Well, I would tend to kind of go with the landowner on this. You know, if Mr. Hayes was trying to develop this, if that were the case, I'd be in support of that. I don't really see us creating an island here in the middle, you know, with this. I'd be in favor of letting it go back to an agricultural zoning myself. Just throw that out there.
I guess the concern I have is if they that zoning is changed to ag zoning, and eventually there's no longer an equine facility on there, and suddenly it becomes a swine facility with.
Well, you can't have a feedlot or anything like that, so you still do.
I mean, you could replace one horse with one hog.
Yeah, well, I mean, you just have to have appropriate fencing, and you'd have to be sure the neighbors can't smell it or hear it too much, or it would fall under the nuisance restrictions, and they would end up being persecuted regardless, so.
So Randy, just to be real clear, this is not airport zone property. It's just flight path property, correct?
That's correct. A portion of the property lies within the airport overlay district.
But that
which is a
not
fly
an
zone.
airport zone.
That's correct.
It's just like that.
I don't have a problem with it either. I second Corey's 2 cents on it. I mean, we could go back and forth all day and put a chart up and here's the positive, here's the negative, and have a, he said, she said, but that's just my 2 cents. Right? Gotta be educated, maybe.
Since we've got something in place to deal with it, it seems to me that conditional use is the right way to take it. And I get what you want to do, but you can sell, and then that's the way it still is. And I mean, zoning is until it gets changed, and conditional use is until you leave. And conditional use will allow you to do whatever you applied for that got allowed. That's why we have that kind of stuff in place. And I understand about the funding, I get it. But that's, again, it's kind of like looking at developer costs. That's not so much in our purview. That's what I think.
The conditional use permitting is where I'm at on this. I'm kind of the same on that. I'm totally for what's going to happen on the property, but committing to a complete rezone here, I'm not sure I can get behind. But I would absolutely commit to doing a conditional use permit for that property.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, unless there's any way to solidify that conditional use permit prior to the purchase of the property, it's not feasible. We won't be able to buy the property without knowing that would come through. So if you guys are able to do something to where we can guarantee that conditional use prior to the purchase, like make it a conditional use contingent, or however that needs to happen, then that is fine, but
Can I ask why that's a hang up with your board?
So,
or that's
to ask a six-figure donation to add on a piece of land to save a few horses, that's a big ask. And so our donors aren't willing to take that risk if it means us having a property that can't be properly cleared because we can't even get enough goats on it to clear it properly, which means mechanical clearing, which isn't something we're willing to do because we don't want to create that nuisance. And only to save a very small number of horses. At that point, our donors.
Do you have a nonprofit, when you say donors, are you intermingling that word, or is it just donations?
Just donations, yeah, from people outside the order.
So you have a nonprofit, you have a board?
Yeah, no, we do not.
This is just.
Yeah, we partner with the Castaway Animal Rescue effort, so the CARE Animal Rescue, which handles some nonprofit stuff, but I've been here 5 years, so we're in the process, but it's a long process.
So, I'm just asking for clarification.
Yeah.
It's not a board governance decision for you, it's a donor.
It's a donor decision.
And so it's really about getting a donor or multiple donors
Yes.
comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you're willing to entertain a discussion with the donors with me, or if they would look to a conditional use to appease that concern, or even again, I don't know if we can do a contract, I don't know what sort of legal assurances we can provide outside the zoning process, but if it doesn't have to be resolved right now with a vote, then I guess I would I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
No, that's okay, yeah.
It's an interesting point. Ken, is there a way to give an assurance?
No, you can't bind through a resolution or anything a future vote of the board here, so you can't bind it. You can do a resolution that is the intent of the board to approve a conditional use permit, but you cannot contractually bind a governing body like yourself.
How long is with conditional use? I think it's good for a year. Is that?
Any time it was put in.
Oh, what are you?
It could be by ordinance. It could be.
So if we did it, I don't need to negotiate real time, I'm just trying to weigh the community's interest, and I think the board is speaking in the light of, we all like the idea that environments are good for our community, they're good for property values, good for to have the mixed use, and good with how we want to market the city. It's where I'm stuck is with the conditional plan, especially down zoning. Maybe it sets a precedence that I'm going to deal with in the future. And so if there was a way that we could permit that with your donors, the use maybe for 10 years, or some period of time that you think would ease that financing concern, that might be an option to discuss as well.
So clarify for me, are you saying like because I heard you say no, you can't guarantee any conditional use.
Yeah, a contract.
No, but can't.
Yeah.
You can't bind a board's future vote.
Yeah.
Things change, that's why that's board's independent.
Yeah.
Well, what he's saying is the board could do a resolution that we all agree that we should do a conditional use permit, which, again, I'm going to be on board with that too. I'm happy to see you do this. I mean,
thank you.
Agricultural in general, and it sounds certainly like we're all in agreement that we would support a resolution for a conditional use permit. I think that's the route we have to go.
I'm just, sorry.
No, I'm just, conditional, I understand what you prefer, and I'm trying to find a way that can, I know it's got.
But on a conditional use permit, would it be for as long as she owned the property?
It can be, yes.
It would be, or would you make it for a period? In this case, I probably make it period based on what's there and customary for financing, so 10 years or some range between 10 years and the life of the property consistent with, you can't do a conditional use, put 50 dogs out there and come back to
Yeah.
But even on a conditional use permit, it's going to be a conditional use permit back to A1, correct?
Well, no, it doesn't change zoning. It just sets
specific.
It says we're going to set aside the animal numbers in the city code.
It could set specific uses outside.
Kind of like playbills, right? That's kind of what we're shaping out here. It's a conditional use permit.
Yeah.
We're not saying we're not in support of it.
I think it's the difficulty comes in because the donors that are willing to pay for this can put their money in any equine rescue, and they can put their money in any city and any location. And so it's hard for me to continue to get that support with no guarantee of being able to actually use it how it needs to be used. When that could easily,
guarantee till we close the deal.
yeah, and they could easily take their funds to a number of surrounding cities or somewhere else where and just find an agricultural property, but then it's not going to my equine rescue, right? Because my equine rescue is located right here in Willard. So they want to invest that money in Willard and they want that to happen here in Willard, but that can't happen without certainty that it's going to go towards equine rescue. I can't get people to donate 6 figures so that we can have some woods next door that can't feasibly house horses without copious amounts of mechanical clearing and other things, because realistically 5 goats, it's not going to clear that property. If I'm limited to 5 animals on that property, unless I get really, really handy with a weed whacker and a chainsaw, I'm gonna need some bulldozers to make that land usable for any number of animals, right? And that's not something that I'm willing to do to the community or to my neighbors. And so it's unrealistic to expect that financing to pull through without any certainty, you know? And that's the only issue with the conditional use. The conditional use sounds wonderful, but without being able to get it approved prior to the purchase, there's.
So I think what Mr. Hendrickson said alluded to trying to focus on the rights of the property owner, giving, I think that's the general sense in the community, right? Trying to give us property owner rights to the full extent that we can. And so we're trying to figure out a way to honor him's property rights, but also not absorb all the risk, right? And so that's why I'm saying if there's a way that we can split the baby, or if there's a way that, you know, we can do a conditional use permit in a way that's going to satisfy your donors to make sure the land can be used in the way it can. I think it's what I'm trying to do is be interested here, right?
Yeah.
No one, I don't think anybody in the community has a concern with the use of this property in general. It's about downzoning. It's about trying to just try to manage that process a bit, because we do have other large tracts of residential or commercial property in the city that are zoned, say, commercial for future commercial development. You know, we want to run on people coming in and saying, well, I don't want it to be commercial, I want it to be agriculture. I don't want it to be residential, I want it to be agriculture. You know, and so that's one of the main purposes of the comprehensive plan, right? And I understand it's not a perfect process, but I'm just trying to find a way to be consistent with giving him what he needs, giving you what you need, but not also put other people at risk either. I know you've got a lot of support, community support here, adjoining neighbors, but there's probably other people in the community that, you know, would want the business that another family would like coming to
Yeah, well, I know a lot of the local businesses do get business from my facility and my property. We have kids that come in for the youth program from Springfield, Ozark, Nixa, Rogersville, Republic. They come quite a ways to the program, and those people, they stop by and they tell me about the amazing little pizza shop down the road that they found that has the best pizza in any of the areas. And so I mean, in that respect.
Do you own the adjoining property, the farm?
The Warhorse Lane property,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
You own it?
Yeah, through a holding company.
Ms. Jennerson, I didn't mean to speak for you. I was kind of using from your feedback to the discussion on property. Putting the board's simple appetite towards property rights, or not property rights, values of property.
So is this something that, I mean, just kind of throwing it out there, it sounds like what we're trying to do is bridge that gap and try and make it work for you guys and make it work for the vision for the city. So I don't know what type of timeline you have as far as with your investors, but do you think that this is something that you and Brad might be able to talk about in terms of if the board is going towards conditional use permit idea, and see if there's something that might be able to work, and then bring this back at a later time, so that way we've done everything that we can to try and make this work, and everybody's heard all, you know, you can get a better idea of what might be possible with the conversation with Brad after some more research. Is that something you'd be open to?
So I can talk to Brad a lot, but I can also talk to all the donors putting money down towards the potential expansion. And I imagine I have a similar conversation that I did after the P&Z meeting, because that's when we first discussed conditional use permitting and looked at all of the details to that. And unfortunately, the vast majority of the funds are gone if that's the only option, because the donors are frankly just uninterested in putting that kind of money forward for the potential to help some animals when they could take their money to a different place and know that they're going to be able to help the animals. That makes sense. They'd rather see me leave Willard and go somewhere else to do more good. But I personally love Willard. My community is here. I want to start my family here, and I want to be here long term. I'd like this to be my home long term. And I'm hoping that with this property, we'll be able to do that and to have the scope that we need to make this a long-term success. Does that make sense?
I think I get what you're saying. Are you, about if you answer my question in terms of, because you're saying in terms of conditional use permit, that you're not wanting to do it unless you can guarantee, if there's a way we can guarantee that you're gonna get that conditional use permit. Is that correct?
Yeah.
No way to guarantee
Right, and there's no way to guarantee it, but there is a way to do a resolution, which would be that our intent is to honor that agreement. That'd be.
Yeah, unfortunately, because, I mean, as it's been said, like, that's not, it's not binding in any way, shape, or form, so even if the resolution is the intent to process the conditional use, that's unfortunately not enough for a six-figure risk.
Right, but how long are we waiting in terms of your investors? Because I'm talking about like 2 weeks, right? Like pushing this another 2 weeks. So is that like too long?
But here's my question, what happens in 2 weeks? Because if her investors aren't willing to fork out any amount of money for a conditional use, we're already saying we can give her a conditional use, but she's saying her investors say, no, we're out if it's a conditional use. I don't know what the difference is.
No, she's not saying that they'd be out if there's conditional use, she's saying that they'd be out if there's no guarantee, right?
But there's no
Right,
way to
there's no way to
guarantee. I guess that's what her.
I get what you're saying.
I don't know that 2 weeks makes a huge difference. I think a 2-week pushback wouldn't be the end of the world, but in that 2 weeks, are we working to get a guarantee? Because, or what could change in that 2 weeks?
Honestly, from our conversation, if it doesn't get approved, I think she's gonna walk away from it.
And I'd really, really love to keep this program going in this community. That's my goal and that's my dream. And that's what the community wants.
So I know that we can get it done in 2 weeks with the notice of public hearing has to be advertised.
Even until the property changes ownership, there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
You can pass all the resolutions and guarantees and there is, but until.
Could get a resolution, but.
It comes back here to get a resolution, it's not binding.
Yeah.
So if this doesn't pass, what you could do is apply for conditional use on your current property.
Yeah,
And change the amount of, because you're talking about putting higher density on the neighboring property, so you've got that as a possibility.
Oh, well, I wouldn't want to put more on my current property because one of the main reasons that we're looking for an expansion of land is so that we don't overwhelm land. Right now, the amount that this property is used, even if I were to expand that, so if I add more horses on an additional 11 acres, the density doesn't change, right? We're still spread out because we're spread out over a
Well, it does if you
area.
ask for an increased density ability, sure it does. I mean,
Well,
currently you're at 1 animal for every 2 acres on your property. You're asking for substantially more on the neighboring property, so yeah, the density increases tremendously.
yeah, because there aren't arenas or houses on the neighboring property that take up acreage, right? So that's the overall, I'm not looking to overwhelm land anywhere, not here, not anywhere else, and so I'm not looking for a conditional use so that I can overwhelm the property with an excessive number of animals somewhere. And, there aren't a lot in need, so I do understand, like, that Whiskey Village was mentioned, there are facilities where you have 10, 20, 30 acres of dry lot covered in manure, right? Because people are packing rescue horses onto one acreage. And that's not what I'm looking to do. I'm looking to take care of the land and give back to the community, and that includes the property and the neighbors that look over the fence, and they should see a beautiful environment for the horses, and they should see all that. They shouldn't see an overpopulated space.
And that's what the neighbors are saying now, your property.
Yeah, it's beautiful rescue horses that are They arrive here with gold coats and ribs showing and all sorts of problems, and before too long, they're shiny and fat and happy and healthy little kids stay out of trouble.
If it wasn't a six-figure cost, and if the land was donated, would your investors have a problem with the zoning?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
If the land was donated or wasn't at the cost that it was, would your investors have a problem with the zoning?
Well, I mean, if it was donated, then it wouldn't be up to the investors anymore, it'd be up to me, and I sure as hell would take the property for free, but I don't think that was up to me either, and I don't think that's,
I was trying to make a point to hyperbolize that it's a risk appetite decision, right? At $0, you're willing to take the risk. At $120,000, you're not.
But it's not her
well,
money.
because it's not my money, right, it's not my call to make.
The donors have, right? I mean, she's speaking for the donors.
We're at Crossroads, boys. I support the conditional use and I also support the rezoning. That's where I'm at.
I'll meet you halfway.
Right. Arm wrestle, of course. He was wearing a punch. My argument is, you've owned the land since 2004, Mr. Reyes?
Yes.
Okay, so the land has been sitting since 2004. Okay, so we do the right thing here, and yes, we rezone it, we become a spot zoning community. We're appeasing and we're making people happy rather than pissing off more people. I think at the end of the day, we have to decide as humans, are we gonna do what's right for our community or what the technicality is? And that's just my 2 cents. And I'm not gonna be the popular decider on that, other than Mr. Hendrickson, but I mean, you have a group of, this is the largest group I've year 2.5 for me. Largest group I've ever seen here, and yes, it's because there's something going on, but is it gonna kill the city if we rezone one area? It might cause headaches, but we're willing to shell out headaches for the recycle center and all this stuff when you take the headaches. I mean, I can go on, but I don't have a problem with that. I think we should do the right thing. I think you name it if you do, name it if you don't kind of situation, but you got a young lady who wants to buy property from Mr. Hayes that, you know, he could apply that money somewhere else in the city of Willard. I would hope he would. Long term, maybe you're gonna move to another city, you know, neighboring us, who knows? But that's just my 2 cents.
Well, something needs to be thrown out there, so I will step out and I'll make a motion to approve this ordinance for rezoning.
We need to read it,
Yeah, technically, I'm ahead of myself, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Just so excited to be able to help out somebody who's doing the right thing.
Everybody said their piece, I'm guessing? Okay. So, you go, our first reading is here.
This is an ordinance amending Willard Land Use Regulations, section 400.380A, City of Willard zoning map by rezoning parcel number 8807-363-00037, as shown in the records of the Greene County Assessor's Office, known locally as North Farm Road 101, Willard, Missouri.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, so we have a first and a second. Alderman Simmons?
Nay.
Alderman Hendrickson?
Yes.
Alderman Whitman? Alderman Baird?
No.
And Alderman Hall?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully something gets worked out with your, then we can move forward with conditional zoning. Conditional use permit.
If I can ask before we do, you've got quite a few people here, we just have a minute speech to the group. I would like to work with you guys in the future, if there's a way that I'd like to do that. I just want to make sure, has anybody not signed the sign-in form at this, Mr. Logan? Has anybody else not signed? Okay, just we have a large public group, just make sure you sign in at the table, so just we have
We want to be able to prove that at least once a year, a few people show up.
thank you guys for coming.
We also,
Go ahead.
in the past, we've given people a few minutes to kind of get up and leave unless you really have a desire for the rest of the meeting. So,
We didn't know something.
Item number 8 is a conflict of interest ordinance. Mr. Administrator.
thank you. This is a process we do every 2 years. Is that right? Jen, and so this is, again, so this will give us a shorter amount of time that it takes to fill out our conflict of ordinances online. We all fill out the short form because of this, and so this is a bit of formality, but happy to discuss it.
Okay. Can I have our second reading, please?
This is an ordinance of the State of Willard, Greene County, Missouri, to establish a procedure to disclose potential conflicts of interest and substantial interest for certain conditions.
I move to approve the ordinance.
Second motion.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Alderman Hall. Alderman Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Hendrickson.
Yes.
Alderman Whitman.
Aye.
And Alderman Baird.
Aye.
Thank you.
Item number 9 is a discussion and vote to approve the application for OTO funding for Jackson Street resurfacing. Mr. Administrator.
Thank you. Let Mr. Brown went to. I will cover this in brief and if he wants to add more to it. But, over the last couple of years, we've tried to put some rigor around our planning for streets, and so for the board's recollection, we started with Proctor Engineering a couple of years ago to really get a more fair, unbiased view of our street conditions. Right? We hear from the community, well, the streets are bad. It's good to have an outside group look at that. So we've done that, and we have the street plan for us for the next 20 years. We've looked at what their recommendations are for the next few years, but also taken the board feedback to leverage as many federal dollars as possible when it comes to managing our street projects. And so with this, broadly, we're looking at using OTO funding for the Jackson Street resurfacing project. And so we'll do a discussion vote just to make sure that we can formalize that we have the board support for that, and put that with our packaging for our other projects. So, Mr. Brown, I'll turn it over to you. More in depth.
Thank you, Brad, for covering apologize to everyone. So we've looked, working with Dave Christensen with Cochran, and this is from one end of Jackson to the other. It's 1.9 miles. It's a Nova chip overlay project. It will require some milling and patching. Total cost for the city is $128,894 provided as handout. These numbers have recently been updated to reflect inflation cost. And for everyone's information, I know Miller Road project has been a topic, but we did receive final payment on that. So we're on the positive side of our funding. We're starting to make some money. So this project, being a federal aid project, takes several months to get through the process. So we just need to formalize this so that this will give the engineer assurance that the board's in support for this project. And, the application will be turned in for OTO to get the process started. So My question was, timeline, when would we get this project built? And if we get started now, our hopes would be that by late next summer, we would have it completed. Happy to answer any other questions that you have.
Randy, you indicated that these figures have been updated recently.
Yes.
Is there any cushion in there for inflation? Are these actual numbers based on if we did it today?
No, these are based on inflation. There's some cushion in there. Realizing that the project won't be bid until late this winter or early next spring.
This is my first go around with OTO funding. I know it says we're approving an application, so we applied, we know we're gonna get the funds, or it's a process where we may not get funds?
No, this is, so the city is allocated by population funding amount every year for surface transportation block grant projects. So the feds, I mean, it's all population based, our amount, but our 2022 allocation for STBG urban funds was $132,995. So last year was $113,978. Next year will be $135,655. And so OTO encourage, it's kind of a funny process, and it's taken me years. I still don't understand everything. Brad is certainly involved at the board level. I'm only on the technical committee level, but they encourage everyone to overspend, imagine, because they want the feds to know that they've got all this money banked out, and that way Missouri or Southwest Missouri will get more money than Kansas City or Southwest District. So again, we're going to be well within our total cost, 128 with what we budgeted for in the street department, and so I think some money from Greene County was being allocated for this. So
I think to the spirit of your question, I don't know if there's any non-budget money that we can set aside for the inflation right now. And an earnest effort has been made to consider reasonable adjustments to inflation. So I don't want to overcommit us by saying, this but things are moving very quickly in the wage labor market as well as in materials and everything else. So we'd like to hurry up and get this approved, make sure we can turn in with our paperwork with understanding this is what we're going to do. And I think, Randy, that's fair. I think that's kind of where your mind is at.
Yeah,
what you need.
I mean, I was just trying to explain to Mr. Simmons that the OTO process is that first the engineer has to submit application to OTO and to MoDOT. Then it has to go on the technical committee and to the board of directors for the tip. Then it has to be accepted after both committees. Then it has to go on the STIP. And so, it's a very lengthy process for FHWA. Instead of just having our consultants review something and us bring it back to you guys, it's almost like it has to go to MoDOT and then to Jeff City and then to Federal Highway. So everything, it's very timely process to get in the hoops, and we just want to get on that list. Sure.
Any other questions? Need a motion to approve? Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Alderman Simmons?
Aye.
Aldermen Hendrickson?
Yes.
Alderman Whitman?
Yes.
Alderman Baird?
Yes.
And Alderman Hall?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item number 10 is a discussion and vote to approve streetlight change request. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. So last meeting, some of you might have not been able to attend, had Jackie Greify, who's employee, I'm not exactly sure her title, I don't remember, but she tried to explain some of the questions that came up, but I did include an email at your desk. I called her today. She's been out of the country and just getting back, was not going to be able to attend tonight's meeting. And based on her memory, this is the information that she sent, the questions that came up. So I'm happy to get back with Jackie or other Liberty employees if there's still unanswered questions. I think what started this, there was a lady here, Debbie from Fox Creek Homeowners. So I've been working with them for several months on options for a light at Hunt Road and Osage. So in your packet, there's several requests. And the city only requested one of the four. And that is the one that, if you look at it, it is work order 964052, top left-hand corner, and it says Hunt Road and Osage. So I think I was asked to bring back to the board the cost to install the street light down there. And so that cost is $34.71 per month, would be added to the city's street light bill that we pay now. I learned this afternoon from Jackie that these other three lights, if I understood her correctly, these were change outs. These, so Liberty servicemen internally, they've gotten calls from either citizens or the city saying that these lights aren't working properly, and they track that to some extent, and they've gotten to the point where they're upgrading to the LEDs. So these lights, my understanding, these other three lights have already, this work's already been completed. This is a formality that they send us, because we don't actually request these to be changed out. So any new street light requests that come to the city, again, the cost, I'm happy to go over these costs for the LEDs. There's minor upgrades, and all three of the other lights are minor cost increase.
Randy?
Yes, sir.
So, just to shine a lot of light on the subject. They make these changes and then just send us the.
was news to me this afternoon when I was going over.
That's what you're saying?
This email, yes, sir.
Okay. And
I think to add to it, Sam, that they understand that our position on the amount of money we're paying in for streetlights. And in the email, Jackie explains that the engineer has been in contact with their service, with their line department, and they are trying to put in all LED 1 fixtures because they cost less than the LED 2s.
so, I read her letter, and I'm not sure I understand. Let's say facility use charge. Is that a one-time fee, or is that?
Give me 1 second.
Sure. You got annual energy
Yes,
charge,
yes.
facility use charge.
It is unless it's a light upgrade or a change out. Okay, so anytime a new streetlight's put up, there's a facility usage charge, a one-time fee.
Okay.
That's not gonna show up, I mean, I think they prorate it out, but that cost is set, and I'm referring to the Hunt Road and Osage one.
Okay.
So that's the overall cost, and then from there, they start depreciation. They start depreciating it out. But what Jackie told me today was...
Wait a minute. They bill us that amount.
They don't ever bill us that amount. That's only one number in their formula.
Okay.
That is used to determine what the cost is.
So, okay, so for the facility usage charge on Hunt Road of $3,800.
Okay, if I'm trying to explain this, what I'm saying is, that's the total cost for the pole, the wire, the transformer, and all the linemen, the light, and everything.
And then
That's their
we
cost.
pay that off over a period of time?
Yes.
And what is that period?
Can't tell you that.
Okay. That's all right.
Is that factored into the $34.71 a month, or is that in addition?
No. What you said first.
So the $34.71 is the cost of whatever it costs to
Yes.
power that bulb?
Yes.
And then the $3,800?
Yes, take it into account over time. Yes.
It looks like the annual charge is $416, so it's paid out over 9 or 10 years. Appears to me.
So
It says 9%, it says,
yeah,
line C times 9%.
9%, right. So 11 years.
So we always bring these requests. Jennifer receives these from Liberty. With the exception of, again, the Hunt Road and Osage, because I requested, I've been working with the engineer from Liberty, because as requested, I brought this back. So I guess I would ask for a vote to approve the Hunt Road if the board's in favor of putting that street light up.
And incurring the cost on the city, correct?
Yes.
I'm for that. I'll be the first to say.
Is the light that are going up on city property in the right of way somewhere? I'm trying to wrap my head around how this light's gonna be configured there, so.
It should be in the plan.
Okay.
It'll be just right off of Hunt Road on Osage on the south side.
Right.
There's an angle fence there now because we constructed a sidewalk and the guy built it.
So it'll be shining the light on the sidewalk, in other words, that we put in, correct?
I mean, it's gonna
Or is it gonna
be
be on the side of the road?
it'll be pointing towards, I'm assuming it's going to be pointing towards the intersection of Osage and Hunt.
But it'll illuminate the sidewalk, that
Yes,
culvert.
very much so.
Yeah, okay.
With an LED light, it's gonna light that corner up.
And the city put in the sidewalk, just to clarify, correct?
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
It's needed.
Yeah, it's dark up there.
I would make the motion to approve.
We have a first and a second. Alderman Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Hendrickson.
Yes.
Alderman Whitman.
Aye.
Alderman Baird.
Yep.
And Alderman Hall.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Item number 11 is an ordinance reaffirming gross tax receipts for Liberty Electric. Carolyn, I think that'd be you.
What this ordinance does is makes it where the city can contain a 1% franchise tax fee. If you do not do this ordinance, we will have to go down to a 0.046%. Because what they're saying is, according to statute, we cannot make more than we are right now unless we pass this statute, or pass this ordinance. Currently, we draw on average, and this is an average of over that 3 years, $269,383. We would still draw that because they had a 7% increase in the rates, but we would have to lower our rate in order to bring it back to that. By passing the ordinance, leaving it at 5%, we will increase our revenue approximately $19,800, close to $20,000. So instead of having 269, we have around 290,000. Any questions?
So this is just to maintain the same percentage of revenue.
Correct.
We're taking the same percentage of that tariff as we had been before.
Correct. It would still be at 5%, but because they increased the rate 7%, we would increase because the taxes on those.
This is an ordinance of the City of Willard, Missouri, reaffirming the gross receipts tax to be imposed upon electric corporations conducting business within the city and matters related thereto.
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Alderman Simmons?
Aye.
Alderman Hendrickson?
Yes.
Alderman Whitman?
Yes.
Alderman Baird?
Yes.
And Alderman Hall?
Yes.
Thank you.
Second reading of the same, please.
Yes, this is an ordinance of the City of Willard, Missouri, reaffirming the gross receipts tax to be imposed upon electric corporations conducting business within the city and matters related thereto.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Alderman Baird?
Aye.
Alderman Hall?
Aye.
Alderman Simmons?
Aye.
Alderman Hendrickson?
Yes.
And Alderman Whitman?
Aye.
Thank you.
Number 12 is an ordinance amending the 2022 budget. Carol?
Currently, we have not made any changes from when we presented it to the board. The original, not last meeting, but the meeting before, is the same. Since we had put the budget together back in October, November of last year, and since we started the beginning of the year, we have had our audit. Some of the figures, the funding has changed a little bit, but basically the numbers are fairly the same. Of course, when we put the budget together originally, it was a projection on what we would end up at the end of the year. We actually ended up with a little more than we had projected, so that changes the total balance. We look at the summary page. So that brings it up some for that. It was at $4,900,000. Now, currently with this budget, we figure our projection is at the end of the year, we should come out with around $5,700,000. Are there any questions about the budget?
I was unclear with the modifications from the last vote on this.
There's no modifications since the last vote.
No modifications since the first read, right?
No.
Thank you.
We have our second reading.
This is an ordinance to amend the 2022 budget.
Move to approve. I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Alderman Baird?
Aye.
Alderman Hall?
Aye.
Alderman Simmons?
Aye.
Alderman Hendrickson?
Yes.
And Alderman Whitman?
Aye.
Thank you.
Our new item, number 13, is tree board. So
I'll introduce it briefly. This surfaced today, so we're going to kind of do a little real time staff work here. One of our tree board members has grown a little older and taller and wiser, much like her trees, but it's time for her to step off the board due to some health issues. And so my understanding, Ms. Rose, there's someone who stepped forward and filled out an application to be on the tree board.
The two members, Rick and Wayne, that are on there, talked with this guy, and he just texted us this afternoon. This is someone that they think would be good for it, because they don't have a lot of feedback on.
How many members can be on the tree board?
I believe it's three, at least three, there has to be.
There has to be at least three. Is there, you know, the limit?
We have a subject matter expert in the house tonight. Mr. Knight, do you know the intricacies of this tree board?
I believe that tree board can have as many as 7 members on the tree board, so. Rick Flint, is that the application name?
Yes.
He worked with Wayne Parker at Missouri Department of Conservation, and came highly recommended by Rick Stenberg in terms of tree knowledge. I think it would be a good fit in terms of overall knowledge about the trees in our community.
He's a long-term voter. That I recognize the name as a long-term.
Yep. And on a side note, but I also learned this when visiting with Rick about it. Rick Flint is also apparently the best, gosh darn, crappie fisherman in the state of Missouri. And
Somebody's got to be good.
So I mean, with 3 and 4, you know, an endorsement like that, I support it.
So we only have 2 members currently serving, so for the board to function, we have to have a third.
Correct.
Person.
We did suspend our last meeting, which should have taken place last Thursday, because we didn't have enough members to conduct business. So
Just for clarification, can you tell me what you do in a tree board meeting?
I can. So the tree board meeting, generally the tree board discusses where we currently are in terms of budget outlay, which to remain a tree city for the Arbor Foundation, you must maintain a capital outlay of $2 per person of population inside city limits to be spent exclusively on tree care, maintenance, or installation. So basically, they look at the budget, what we spent so far in terms of material support. That would be stuff like mulch, staff time, trimming trees, weeding around trees, just general tree care. You can even count removal of trees, training qualifies, equipment purchases that are used to care for trees, so watering tank, chainsaws, pruning equipment, that kind of thing all counts. And then of course the investment in specifically the cost of the tree. And one of the stipulations for the tree board, for the Arbor Day Foundation to maintain a tree city is those trees have to be planted in public spaces and not on private land. So we discussed where the budget is. They asked me for my input on where I would like to see them add trees to the community. I provide that feedback. We discussed what species of trees would be the best fit for the locations that I recommend adding trees to. And then we communicate about putting that out to bid to where we would need to, what cost we would expect to incur for the installation of those trees.
Thank you, sir.
Well,
Is it a problem that Mr. Flint doesn't live inside the city limits?
no, you can have up to 2 outside the city.
Okay.
He worked out at the D.o.D facility for several years.
Yeah. I mean, I just think you'd be a fine addition. I just want to make sure we're not running afoul of tree board bylaws.
You gotta live in the city to be on boards. It's all on the tree board, but like city council and all that, you have to live in the city, right? You do.
And in the ward that you were.
When is the next tree board meeting, Jason?
It really depends on when we can get someone appointed to that position. There's no point in having a meeting before we get that set. So generally they're quarterly. The first Thursday of the quarter month, so January, April, July, we'll have another one in November. So we'll have one in this July timeframe, because really right now is when we need to be making those decisions, ordering those trees, in order to get them in and installed in this fiscal year, which runs January to December, just like the city's fiscal.
So we're waiting on this appointment, so for
Correct.
this, this timeframe's trees to be planted.
Yes.
The only reason I ask that, and I don't have an issue with this at all, but typically I do like to meet with people who are appointing, and I understand sounds to be an emergency type of case. So I'm fine with that, but in the future, if that's possible, that way I can meet with them, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be ideal. Reached out to me on Friday and asked if I could see about getting them pushed through, and so I sent them the information and got that to them as quick as I can. But I do understand your request.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we need to have a vote, I'm guessing? Okay. Let's make a motion on that.
I would move to approve the application for Rick Flint. Second.
We have a first and a second. Alderman Simmons? Aldermen Hendrickson?
Yes.
Alderman Whitman?
Aye.
Alderman Baird?
Aye.
And Alderman Hall?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item number 14 is new business. Does anybody have any new business to bring forward? Anybody have any unfinished business to bring forward?
So, we've had 3 people come up and speak on different topics tonight. I think one issue was how we are channeling the runoff of heavy rain events as it goes down south of Highway 160. So I know we started a project where we were cleaning that channel. And I know we ran into a variety of things. COVID, other things. And I also know we're struggling with staffing issues right now. Is there a way to kind of realistically target finishing that project, those improvements?
Yeah, if I can, I'll just kind of talk out loud and give you my sense of where things are at. So the developer who's developing what's been described there, maybe in 160, that area, the Southview, known as the Southview drainage area, obviously the city's looking for development, right? We want to see that property development to the spirit of the property rights. We want to, or the values of the property holders. That's what the property holders desire as well. And so we've been very earnest in our efforts to make sure that whatever was done on that property kept us within all of our standard engineering practices, as well as our FEMA guidelines and everything else that goes along. So we have spent considerable amount of money, and the developer has spent quite a bit of money making sure that land has all been developed according to those standards. And so outside of that, to be fair to everybody, those are the rules, everybody's following them. To the property owners that have concerns in that area, I understand their concerns. Water comes from all the way to high school, all the way down. I think we're all familiar with Willard and how water flows, right, generally. Everybody's been on board for a good amount of time. And so it does end up in Southview, majority of Willard's water goes through that Southview drainage. So specifically to your question, it will never be complete, because it's always going to be an ongoing process to clean out brush from the culverts, and make those ongoing maintenance. It's operation and maintenance, right? There's no project that ends on this date. What is complete, and what we have done, is clean out the channel I'm gonna say it's materially complete, I don't know where it's at right now, but since the last 5-inch rain events we had, most of that's been cleaned out between New Melville and, say, a third of the way down that basin as it approaches AD. We did spend a considerable amount of money on the Southview Street, putting in culverts, improving that to allow drainage to go through that area. So it's something we're actively monitoring. It's something that we're actively, engaging in and making sure we're within all of our flood requirements. And I understand folks' concerns that live in the floodplain. But those homes are in a floodplain that's been there generationally. That floodplain, it moves every 10, 15 years depending on how FEMA adjusts those maps. But there's been no significant change in those boundaries. And we can bring those maps at a later time and review them for transparency. But I don't believe anything has changed to increase the risk of those homes flooding based on the stormwater calculations that have been done with the project so far. I understand the perception that this spring's rain events caused in that area to make that perception true. But when you look at having 5, 6, 7 inches of rain in 24 hours, that's going to send, a significant amount of stormwater through that drainage basin. So I'll pause there and happy to unpack it or discuss it as long as the board would like, or whatever residents there are. But have I said anything incorrect or?
Just like to add one thing, that actually since the development, the Gage Street detention basin has been installed, we've actually seen improvements to New Melville, because every time we would get a 2 or 3 inch rain, our public works used to have to put cones across the road. And now that detention is holding that water back, releasing it slower, and it seems to be working better. So we're hopeful that once the channel improvements, once the grass gets established in the channel, we'll have a better handle on all of it. Just that, as you guys noticed during the heavy spring rains or that 5-inch rain, that turf mat washed out. It's been washed out twice. So this is the 3rd time it's been installed, and hopefully they've got it, put in a little better this time. It's hard to control Mother Nature when it's great.
So, I realize we're passing more water under the road than we used to, with those culverts being put in. Are you saying we're passing less water now with that development?
No, I'm saying that due to the detention is holding that water back and releasing it at a slower rate.
You're saying we're passing less water at any one time?
Yes.
Than we were. Which is really the flooding if it's too much water at one time. So, Mr. Cobb, you spoke to us a little while back, earlier in the meeting. After this last 5-inch rain event, did you have flooding issues?
No, I've been there for 45 years and I've never had a flooding issue.
Okay.
I think if I ever do, there's a lot of people in trouble.
Just want to make sure we keep that.
My eyes, I continue to see rooftops and asphalt going down, and that equates to additional runoff.
And as long as we keep retaining it correctly, then.
Yeah, if some of the ditches still need to be cleaned up some, debris gets in that stuff and backs it up. I hope you appreciate the irony. I came up here in the middle of the drought to talk about stormwater.
No better time.
Oh, yeah, they will run off.
Yeah. 16 Barwick.
Again, I want to be careful about what we speak about when it comes to individual people or want to respect individuals regardless of caste or capacity. We have several nuisance properties across the city. This one is on the top of our list. It's our highest priority. But there is a process that has to play out to protect all the citizens in Willard. And so it's always difficult. The last problem property we had like this was on Berry Lane, Berry Street, and it took us about the same amount of time to remediate the nuisance. I am aware of the concern, and we did have plans to mobilize Public Works and staff to remediate the nuisance last week, and we were unable to do that.
Because of staffing?
Yes, we've had several staffing concerns and turnover. There's a pretty tight labor market right now, and it's very competitive in that labor market. And so we can't complete work without people. And so until we get people, much of the work that's been described and discussed, whether it's Southview or Barwick, is going to be on pause. And so to address critical water and sewer needs, and that's the reality that we live in. And so I believe that we have the court authority. There's a couple of steps that we have to take during a nuisance property to build a case, and then once that case has been made, our next step in a situation like this would be to issue a search warrant and do a couple other things to allow us to be on the property safely, and then to start to remediate the nuisance. The plan is to start with any nuisance property, we start with the outside of the property and remediate that first, and then start to work into the middle of the property.
Do we have the authority right now? I mean, it sounds like we do, to go in, at least on the outside of the property, to clean it up. We just pause that one.
We have to have a judge issue a warrant for us to be there, and so we would coordinate that.
Did we have that in place before and then it expired or something?
It hasn't been requested since last Thursday when the court date occurred. And so had the opportunity to ask the courts for a warrant to go over the property.
So we were going to do it, but our personnel issues put it off to asking for that, and so we just took the time out.
There's no reason to ask for it if I'm not going to immediately
I get it.
yield the property.
Okay. You're comfortable when we got staff, we're going to get back around.
Yeah, we would have, it's kind of the worst time to do it, right? We would have liked to have done it before, but we had to go through certain cases. We have to make sure that when we're remediating a nuisance, we're not exposing the city to risk on ourselves, right? We're trying to make the community better. And so that's the process that we need to go through.
At what point do we have to get to before we say we're going to go in and clean it up? Because it sounds like this has been going on complaint-wise for quite a while.
Yeah, I don't know about the exact date. I mean, on and off for a long time. I don't know exactly about 3 years and how you determine and scope that perception, but a long time is a fair, nondescript way of saying it. It takes a long time to build a file, and so the next step would be to remediate the nuisance outside the property, and then if we're going to go in the property, we have to start going down a condemnation process. That would take. I haven't heard it myself, so we'd have to ask Ken to give us some perspective on that. But that would be. We'd have to execute that process and go through it. And the house is close. I'm making an informed opinion. My perception is that the house is close to being a total wash. I don't know if it would be salvageable. I don't know what point it's not. We haven't been in the house. We have to get another warrant for that. But then we would go through the condemnation process. Again, I don't need to push on the spot. How long after we got a warrant, cleaned up the outside of the property, you think it would take to navigate the process and get a condemnation and go through the condemnation process?
Oh, each city's different. I haven't committed Willard's to memory, but there's a process in the ordinance that allows, you have to have a hearing on, they have due process rights and so forth. But my guess is you could probably, if you pushed it, you get it done 2-3 months to condemn it. You know, and that's probably pushed Randy on doing what he's supposed to, have to do.
I was gonna say 6 months. We've never condemned one, but having experience working with an inspector from Stratford that has condemned a couple properties, if the owner objects or gets an attorney involved, then it's like anything, attorneys get, it's just a very lengthy back and forth, process until you can finally get a judge to order one way or the other.
So what do we have to do to determine it is in a condition that it needs to be condemned? I guess what I'm asking is, if we think that's what's going to happen, why are we waiting until we clean up the yard to start that process?
I was trying to take the project in bite-sized chunks, this has capacity to exercise against a number of priorities, and also as well as managing costs as we go through the process. So I guess my intent would be that if we cleaned up the outside of the process, the property with staff and priorities, that would be a significant first step, and then that would lay the groundwork for the remainder of the condemnation process, getting warrants, going back through that.
So a question, I think I worded this. If our end goal is to condemn the house due to, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, you said there was animals coming out of the garage window. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah, there's no utilities developed that house.
Okay.
There never has been for a long time. And she at times she's got another house in Springfield, and at times she's had up to 9 dogs inside that house, and she's took off weeks at a time and left them in there with the door shut, window shut, whole 9 yards, even during this heat and everything. And they messed throughout the house. And when she comes back, she throws blankets, whatever they messed on. If it's loose, she throws it out in the back and piles it up and out back behind the door. And the whole backyard is just covered in this stuff. And I have seen the other night an animal coming out through the garage window.
Okay, so 2 questions. If our end goal is to condemn it, why would we spend any dollar figure to clean up the outside of the grounds if we know our end goal is to condemn it? Would be question 1.
I don't know that our goal is to condemn the property.
Okay.
Our goal is to work with the,
Property owners.
again, our goal has been to try and get the person to remediate the nuisance. It's, we didn't want to do that in the middle of the river, right? In our, we did go through a process of getting the dogs, and basically the courts didn't see us being on the correct foot. I'm not sure that's right, but essentially the court gave the dogs back and allowed all that to go back to the way it was. And so there's other things at play that's not, we've sat on our hands for 3 years.
No, and I'm not accusing, I'm just curious because.
So our goal.
I'm just trying to play devil's advocate because if they're releasing dogs, you would think that'd be some kind of health concern of neighbors if there's windows that are broken and they're literally just, 3 years messing in the house, as he's saying. But I'm just playing devil's advocate, I'm just curious.
I would like to say a few things about nuisance cases. In all my cities, every one of my cities has this exact same problem. They all have it. And as an example, Aurora, they budget $100,000 a year just to take care of these houses, and they can't keep up. So it's an ongoing process, but every city has the same goal, which is, let's see if we can get compliance first of all. If we can't get compliance, what can we do to make it be as least costly to the city as possible? In other words, take it to the court and have the judge fine them. This particular person you're talking about has pled guilty each and every time. I've never had to have a trial yet. because she's pleading guilty. And actually, she's paid up until last Thursday, and she pled guilty to another 4 charges. And under the law now, judges have to inquire whether or not the person is able to pay. And if they're not able to pay, you cannot even sentence them to any kind of jail time. So you have all these problems associated with it, and each city, including Willard, tries to approach it, let's try to be compliant to save money. And that doesn't work. And we're at a point now, I think Brad has relayed to me that we've done everything we can, and I think the next step is to probably go in there and, apply for administrative search warrant, go in and clean up, and that's my view of how nuisance works, not only for Willard, but for all my cities.
Yeah, and maybe it's a good time to circle back to the board to have an appetite discussion. Last time we did this, I feel like we're working within the spirit of the board's guidance about, we're not going to rush to condemn. We're not going to, we're going to try to do our best to work with property owners, I guess. We're a small community. We want to try to alleviate ill will if we can, and so we're still working against that. Certainly we can move up the spectrum, and we can move if the board wishes to work, for the city staff to work, make this the highest priority. We can work with Ken and take all actionable steps to expedite the process, understanding, probably cost us probably $100,000, 100 plus.
Well, it's one thing to have city staff driving around looking for violations. It's another to have neighbors coming in and saying, we got a health problem here, we got, an odor problem, we got an animal problem. That's a whole different deal in terms of an appetite for dealing with this kind of issue. I'm not a big fan of the city driving around looking for violations. When we got people coming to us, that should be a higher priority.
Yeah, so I may not couch that correctly. When we get a complaint, we usually take the most action on complaints. We typically don't drive around looking for things. It have to be either complaint driven or so plain and obvious that it requires action. I guess the couch of my thoughts is the speed at which we execute to condemn properties. I think is something that we need to probably talk about, and either on a case-by-case basis or somewhere on the spectrum, case-by-case to Aurora saying we're just going to do it, there's $1,000, $100,000, fix one a year. I think that's where we're at. To Randy's point, we've never condemned a home in Willard before, so there's a little bit of learning curve associated with this.
Sure.
Does the cost of the cleanup and all that go back to the homeowner, or are we gonna need that? I mean, we probably will need that, if we lean on it.
Yeah, but let me tell you about that too. You put lien on it, exactly right, as I mentioned. But the person we're talking about is probably uncollectible. Right. So that's an issue. Sure. Out of all the times I've done this, I've only collected one time for a cost of $45,000. Judgment actually collected from something that was collectible in Aurora. So it's a cost you're going to be eating probably.
Was there a health department issue? I mean, did we ever?
Nobody living in the house.
Sorry?
Nobody's living in the house.
What about outside though? I mean, if there's rats and stuff because lawns filled with feces or whatever.
The health department, I don't think that they inspect. I mean, there's lots of places that there's mice and rats and possums, and I mean, there's wildlife all over town. I don't know that, it's been a problem property, and the dogs are concerned. We got a search warrant, we went in the house, we took the dogs out. She went to court, got her dogs back, and the judge gave us the bill for the impoundment. It was $1,600 and some if my memory serves me right. So, I'm very frustrated, you guys. I like doing my job, and I like being able to tell citizens that we have a plan, we're gonna do this, and it's gonna happen, and this one is drug on and drug on and drug on, and I'll be glad when it's cleaned up myself. Because it's not because I'm not doing my job, I'll tell you that right now. If you say I'm not, you can have my keys.
Well, I think a better way to say it is we've got a file that can be reviewed by the board to show the requirements. I think that's where we're at.
All right, does anybody else have anything else to bring up under unfinished business?
So, on the Airbnbs, we are just, where are we?
Yeah, so trying to capture our thoughts on priorities across the city in some of our staff meetings. It's been something we can demonstrate in the notes. I'm trying to work towards a policy. We're working off the premise that Airbnbs belong along Jackson Street, along the corridor. But you know, that's the premise I'm asking staff to look through. If we can allow residential areas, then the board needs to probably think about what sort of guidance we're going to put around that. If you follow things in the news, there's a lot of, I call them issues because that's how they appear, but around people having parties and Airbnbs, there's not a lot of way to, we can go out and break up parties, that kind of thing. So just some general guidance with it. Springfield's very controlled with it. These other cities, those are East Republic, most areas don't have a policy yet.
But they're allowing.
I don't know that one way or the other. I don't know that those are East Republic. I don't know who allows them, who doesn't. I think they're there, whether they're approved or permitted or not, because people are just doing it.
So I guess really that was my next question was, is there anything that stops me from turning my house into an Airbnb?
There's no, I guess
aside from the fact that I don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff around hoteling and as far as accessory structures and buildings. If you wanted to do your bedroom as an Airbnb, I don't know that there'd be anything to stop you. There would be staff out there pounding on your door issuing you a ticket. I've seen on Airbnb before, I've seen people have properties there briefly. I've only seen that once. I don't see it as an ongoing thing. What are some of the other conversations we've had in the past?
So I thought that we were setting a precedence for conditional use permits for Airbnbs. And that's what I explained to this gentleman yesterday when he came in asking questions. I said, we don't have zoning currently for that. We've approached it. Our stance has been, if you want to fill out a conditional use permit application, I'm happy to submit that and go through the process. I said, you're also welcome to come to the board and we'll get some input on it. So he said, well, it doesn't seem really right that I should go buy a property and then find out that a conditional use permit's not approved. And I said, I certainly understand.
With earlier.
Right.
Understand that.
Along the same lines, with the conditional use permit, what are are there any procedures for being able to rescind that if the city finds out that, this isn't working? How do you go about?
In practice, we usually issue for 1 year with a certain limit. It's all used food trucks, right? We say, okay, I'm going to saturate here, but you need to have your trash cans cleaned up. You need to, don't need to leak to our sewer, whatever it is. And if we find a food truck that's running a line out to our sewer or tapping our water line or making the area trashed up, then next year when they come back and ask for a permit, we reflect on that. So that's generally how we.
So basically, if it's issued, it's good for the length of whatever term is decided upon.
You can put any conditions you want on it. You can put conditions that if they stop the use for a month,
and then start back up again, then, you know, it could be anything you want.
Do they have to go through that process every time? That has to come back before the board for a vote and the whole, I mean, just like you start over again, essentially?
A renewal?
Yeah.
I wouldn't think so if there weren't issues. Only if there were issues, and we would bring it back.
Consider it a
Well, I guess it's your.
I didn't think you were going to speak first.
Anybody else have anything else to bring up?
Thank you, Greg.
I'd like to make a motion to recess the open session.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a first and a second. Alderman Baird?
Aye.
Alderman Hall? Alderman Simmons? Alderman Hendrickson?
Yes. So I introduce myself, Steph Bradshaw.
Thank you.
Jason's great.